Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Layam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Namah Pranavathaya Shuddha Jnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yamadharmaraja starts the Upadesha. Somewhere in this section, in this Valli, with this mantra, he begins to answer Nachiketa's question. Question was very elaborate, as we've seen. What transcends dharma, adharma? What is beyond karana, karya? What is it that transcends time? Tell me about that. Very elaborately formulated question. We have seen in the Bhagavad Gita also, Bhagavan gives this whole Upadesha after starting from 11th verse of the second chapter. After Arjuna had asked Bhagavan, I don't know what to do. Please accept me as your Shishya. Shishyasteham Pradimam Tvam Prapannam. And then bulk of the teaching about Atma is there in the second chapter. After that, it's a lot of elaboration, a lot of detailing. But then in the second chapter, almost everything about the Atma is covered. And that second chapter borrows heavily from Kathopanishad. From this part of the Kathopanishad, from this Valli, which is the bulk of the Upadesha. But it is not easy to understand. You simply say, Atma is not born, Atma never dies. Very difficult. So, having explained what Atma is, in the Gita also, Bhagavan takes another 16, 17 chapters to explain this. Same way here, Yamadharmaraja talks about the Atma, that which Nachiketa wants to know, knowing which one is free. Knowing which I know I am free. It is not that you become free after knowing that. All that happens is knowing which I know, oh, I've been free all the time. Why have I been struggling like this? Like an ignorant person. I didn't have to struggle. That is all the teaching is. But it is about I. And that I, unlike any other knowledge, has to be assimilated aparokshataya. It is about I, the self. No other knowledge can be called aparoksha. Every other knowledge is either paroksha, away from you, distant from you, not seen, or pratyaksha, directly available to the senses. This is the only knowledge of the self which is aparoksha. It is neither paroksha nor pratyaksha. And therefore, a very different kind of knowledge. And therefore requires a lot of elaboration, a lot of unfolding by somebody who's understood. Dharmaraja takes on this teaching and all the elaboration on this teaching from here on. And Vyasacharya borrows heavily from here to do the same thing for Arjuna. Ityevam prishtavate
Yatyevam
पृष्ठवते
mrityu-ruvacha
Mrityu-ruvacha
prishtam vastu
Prishtam
वस्तु
Vastu
visheshanantarancha
Visheshanantaram
विशेषणान्तरं च
vivakshan
Vivakshan
ityevam prishtavate. What? In this manner, Nachiketa, having asked in the previous mantra, what is it that transcends Punya Papa, that transcends time, that is beyond Kare Karana? Having asked this, he says, Iti evam prishtavate. Nachiketa, having asked this question, Mityuhu vacha. Mrityu tells him the answer to that. About what? Prishtam vastu. That vastu that was asked about. In detail, Visheshana Antarancha Vivakshana. Wanting to give the details, he says. And what does he say? Sarve Veda Yat Padamamananti
Sarve Veda Yat
पदमामनन्ति
Tapamsi Sarvani Cha Yat Vadanti
Tapansi
तपांसि
Sarvani Yat
सर्वाणि च
Vadanti
यद्वदन्ति
Yadichanto Brahmacharyan Charanti
Yadichanto
यदिच्छन्तो
Brahmacharyam
ब्रह्मचर्यं
Charanti
चरन्ति
Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi
Tatte
तत्ते
Padam
पदं
Sangrahen
संग्रहेण
Brahmimi
ब्रवीमि
Etat.
Om
यत्
Yetat
Om, the sound, is a very interesting starting point for learning. So Yamadharmaraja starts the teaching by saying, I will tell you in brief, Sangrahena Bravimi. Very briefly, I will tell you about that which you want to know. Tat te padam. Tat padam te. To you, tubhyam. I will tell you. And he really tells him very briefly. You can't be briefer than this. One aksharam. Om. It is not Aum. Nor is it it is just one aksharam. Ekaksharam. Om. Period. You can break it down into many parts. And it's very interesting to break it down because it lends itself to very detailed understanding. But it is only one aksharam. Om. Om iti etat. This is all there is. Om. This is what everybody is searching for. Who is everybody? Any mumukshu. You've already seen mumukshu. Mumukshutvam is a necessary condition for the seeker. If you don't know where you're going, you can go anywhere. So mumukshutvam is a necessary condition for every mumukshu is searching for this, trying to understand what this is. And that everybody is searching for is only Om. The world calls it primordial sound. That is, the West calls it primordial sound. The world could have went down. They say, Bible also it says, no? In the beginning there was word. What word? NASA has been experimenting with sounds emanating from the sun. And somewhere they've recorded, I saw some WhatsApp posts on that. What sounds like Om? But what is Om? One has to understand. That which is elaborated by every Upanishad, every Veda, and consistently. They all the Vedas say exactly the same thing. They elaborate on Om. Sarve Veda Yat Padam Amananti. Amananti is that they declare, propound consistently. Samanvaya is there. There is no contradiction between any of the texts that you study. They all talk about that which they talk about is Om. Om is everything. Sarve Veda Yat Padam Amananti. That which everybody is searching for which all kind of religious discipline is prescribed. You know, the life of a Vedic person, a person who follows Veda, one's own Veda. You know how the whole Veda thing came about. Apparently, what was before Vyasacharya's time, all the Veda mantras were together. And it's not that Vedacharya wrote the Vedas. Vyasacharya did not write the Veda. What he did was, he assigned 4 of his Shishyas, including Gemini, and split what was available into 4 groups. Each group consisting of one set of action-based injunctions. Do this and don't do this. If you want this, do this. ways and means. And at the end of each one of these four, Vedanam Anta, each one of these four at the end was the exposition of the truth, the reality, called Upanishads, Vedanta. And typically what happened was each family line adopted one of them. So that becomes your Swadhyaya, that which you should study. So when somebody does, when you get Upanayanam, you get mantra to do a namaskara. Total identity of the individual. Where do I originate from? And among that is also which Veda does my family follow? Yajush Shakha, Rik Shakha, whatever. And one is supposed to follow at least once one Veda, one's own Veda. Because people also study more than one Veda. And in the country, you will find everywhere Dvivedi, Trivedi, Chaturvedi. Many, the same thing in Bengali we have, no? Bandhopadhyay, Chattopadhyay, all are same. So you study at least one, your Veda, and follow that Veda. All the injunctions of the Veda one's supposed to follow. But all of them tell you the same thing. When you go to the Upanishad portion, see, this prescription of the rituals may be different. They have different style, slightly different rituals. But they all tell you exactly the same thing when it comes to that knowledge, Vedanta. Whichever Upanishad you take, it gives exactly the same thing. Sarve Veda Yat Padam Amananti. And in the Karma Kanda, they prescribe religious disciplines. Live life like this, do this, don't do this. Like the Christians follow the 10 Commandments. Do this, don't do this. They're also there in all the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas. But strict discipline. If you follow that discipline of the Veda, whichever ascension it is, it's a tough life. So that apamsi sarvani chayat vadanti. For which purpose they prescribe, all of them prescribe certain religious disciplines. Desiring which, what does everybody desire? Whether I know it or not, I desire moksha. Every human being desires moksha. I may not know it, but that's what I'm looking for. A very small handful of people understand that's what I'm looking for. This group, for example. But whether I know it or not, everybody looking for that moksha. That yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti. Brahmacharyam charanti can be taken as yadichantaha. One could go into become an antevasi. Today's lifestyle doesn't easily allow that. Antevasi means you go to the Gurukulam and say, my desire is to understand that knowledge which is moksha. So I dedicate my life to understanding that. How do I do that? I go to the Gurukulam, to a guru, and entirely submit my life to that knowledge. Or brahmacharyam charanti could also mean irrespective of where I am, my only focus is to understand that idea called Brahman. An idea called Brahman, which I am or I is. And to do that with knowledge, with some viveka, I put away all other desires. So that one single desire for moksha is the paramount desire. Because I've understood that the other achievements of any other desire is not in my interest. Therefore, I only focus on that. Represented here by brahmacharyam. That's another way of looking at it. Yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti. Follow lifestyle which is conducive for gaining this knowledge. Getting the meaning of Om. That I will tell you very brief. If you have to elaborate on something, it is relatively easy. There was a story about, I think it was Abraham Lincoln. Somebody came to him and said, will you come and address our group? He said, sure. If you want me to speak, I want to know how long. Because on that depends when I can give my date. So he said, if you want me to speak for 2 hours, you can fix it for tomorrow. If you want me to speak for 1 hour, give me a week. But if you want me to speak only for 10 minutes, give me a month. Otherwise, generally what happens, once you get hold of a mic in a public forum, you don't want to give it up. I'm sure all of you experience this. You sit in a gathering and you keep saying, my God, when is it going to finish? When is it going to stop talking? That attraction of the mic in the hand. To tell something really briefly, not easy. Here, Yamadharmaraja says, I will tell you in brief. Really in brief, he says, Om. He doesn't even say Tattvamasi. Tattvamasi is 3 words. 1 akshara, Om. But Om is everything. When you analyze Om, as we will do in some detail, you can see that. That is everything. Kathopanishad says, Omityetadaksharam sarvam. Idam sarvam Omityeva. It's aksharam, 1 aksharam. Omityetadaksharam idam sarvam. And goes on to define in response to what probably Nachiketa's question, Kathopanishad says, Bhutam bhavat bhavishyatiti sarvam omkarameva. Omkara, the kara pratyaya is only for uchcharanartham, pronunciation. Omkara is everything. What is past, present, future, everything is only Om. Not only that, we saw in the previous mantra, not just what exists in time, past or present or future, but also what transcends time. Yachanyat trikalatītam tadapi omkarameva. That which transcends time, that which is aparichinna, is also only Om. And having defined Om like that, it goes on to say in the next mantra, Sarvam hi etat Brahma. Sarvam is Omkara. In the very next mantra, it says Sarvam is only Brahman. The obvious conclusion is, hey, Brahman is Om only. Om is Brahman only. And that goes on to say, Ayam Atma Brahma. What is the Brahman? Only Ayam Atma. That's why when very often you will hear me say, Brahman, Atma, Omkara, all mean the same thing. The Vastu, the truth of I. Sarvam idam Omkara eva. So it says, Sarve Veda yat padam amananti, tapamsi sarvani cha yat vadanti, yadichanto brahmacharyan charanti, tatte padam sangrahena bravimi, Om ityetat. Bhashyakara elaborates on some of this in the inimitable style of a Bashyam. Sarve Veda yat padam
Sarve Veda yat padam
padaniyam
padaniyam
maniyam
gamaniyam
vibhagena
vibhagena
avirodhena
avirodhena
amananti
amananti
pratipadayanti
pratipadayanti.
yat padam. Padam here is the end that you want to achieve, the goal. Yat padam sarve vedaha. Yat padam, Acharya said, padaniyam. That goal which is to be reached, which is to be gained, which is to be known in the case of this knowledge. Yat padam padaniyam, that which is to be reached, that goal, that end that is to be reached. Gamaniyam, same meaning, but Gamaniyam also has the meaning of to be known. We will see why both these are being talked about. Gamaniyam to be reached, the end goal to be reached, and Gamaniyam also meaning that to be understood. How? How understood? Avibhagena. Our knowledge of everything in this Jagat is, there's a subject, and that subject knows about an object of knowledge. Anything you take. The botanist knows the rose. There's a subject, there's an object, and there is a process of knowing. Jnatra Jnanam and Jneyam. But this is true of all knowledge, except when it comes to this aparoksha jnana. Because here the jnatra, the knower, the object of knowledge, jneyam, and the knowledge itself, jnanam, are all the same. There is no differentiation because they all depend upon this Atma of the self. Therefore, here, avibhagena, to know this, to gain this knowledge without subject-object differentiation. The moment is split into subject-object, you are in samsara. You are in samsara, meaning the perspective is that of samsara. Our beautiful example of the dream world is like that. In the dream world, he is the person who is in the dream world and he knows a lot of things. He knows I'm hungry. But when he wakes up, the entire spectrum becomes one. The mind of the waking person who goes into dream mode, which projects into the entire multiple varieties of dream objects, tangible and intangible. So within that we have a knower, object of knowledge and knowing. But you know they're all the same. But as long as one sees it from within the dream perspective, there is this differentiation. In the same way, when we are looking at everything from the perspective of the samsara, there is only differentiation. Occasionally, that differentiation disappears and we are one with ourselves. When does that happen? For a very short time, it might happen when one enjoys something so thoroughly that one loses this sense of identity of the self. The false identity that we have, it could be anything. It could be a beautiful sight, a beautiful feeling, a beautiful sensation. When one is completely drowning in wonderful music, you lose the self. You lose the self-identity. At that time, there is no subject-object differentiation. Doesn't last very long, but you know you are. So, avibhagena, without the subject-object differentiation, one learns this. And all Vedas talk about the same thing. There is samanvaya. There is no contradiction anywhere in our scriptures. If it looks like there's a contradiction, it might happen. Apparently, there's some contradiction. It will be in elements which have no real significance. For example, in Taittiriya Upanishad, it talks about Panchabhuta. Talks about Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apaha, and Prithvi. Chandogya Upanishad talks only three. Akasha, Vayu, and Agni. Looks like a contradiction, but really is insignificant. It doesn't change anything of our understanding of the reality. So there is no contradiction anywhere between all the Vedas. Avirodhena, no virodha. Without this kind of this thing, where what padam, what end they all talk about is describe, reveal, propound, amananti, pratipadayanti. Tapamsi sarvani,
Tapansi sarvani
Tapamsi
yat
sarvani
vadanti,
yat
yad vadanti
vadanti
yat prapyarthan
yat
yad
prapyartha
prapyarthan
ityarthaha.
ityarthaha.
That vastu for which, to gain which, yat prapyarthan, what austerities, what discipline is prescribed. Tapamsi sarvani yat vadanti. All the Vedas tell you certain ways of living. This is important, not directly for gaining knowledge of the moksha, but as we've seen, for getting ready for it, adequately prepared for it. So, sarvani tapamsi cha yad vadanti yat prapyarthan iti artha. So that is the second pada of the tapamsi sarvani cha yat vadanti. There is this necessary part of the preparation. All this Om covers. Om covers the preparation. We will see in the further mantras also. Om covers the preparation by becoming the alambanam for our puja, our upasana. It also lends itself an analysis, mimamsa, to understand what it means and therefore gain the knowledge. Sometimes one is not ready for it, so one has to prepare oneself for it. Therefore, upasana. Therefore, all the religious disciplines. Tapamsi sarvani chayat vadanti. Yadichanto
yadichanto
brahmacharyam
brahmacharyam
Charyam
gurukulavasa lakshanam
gurukula vasa
vasa
lakshanam
lakshanam
yadichanto, to gain which, the desire for gaining which leads one to brahmacharyam. So brahmacharyam, Acharya defines, one definition is Gurukula Vasa Lakshanam. Gurukula Vasa Lakshanam implies a certain commitment. I don't take this as a casual, okay, let me try this also. I look at it as something which is priority. Therefore, other desires take a lower priority. Other desires don't lead me into other temptations. Today, let me not go to the class. There is a very nice India-Pakistan cricket match, World Cup final. That doesn't distract. My priority is very clear. My commitment is very clear. To dedicate a few years of one's life to the full-time study of this requires several things to happen. Clearly, one has to be prepared. If one is not prepared, it can be difficult, sometimes even frustrating. Therefore, one, before going into a Gurukula Vasam, has to examine whether I'm ready in all ways. Second, there are so many obstacles on the way. Have I been able to work towards removing all the obstacles? To quieten all the obstacles, whether they are adhyatmika obstacles, adi bhautika obstacles, or are the adi daivika obstacles. Have I worked enough to gain adequate punya to not let the obstacles really become obstacles? That also is important. And the commitment to say that I don't know what will happen at the end of the 4 or 5 years or 3 years or whatever it is that I'm going to spend in the Gurukulam with my Guru. But I'm willing to completely dedicate my life for that period to this learning. Any other method opens itself up to, at the least, enormous delays, at the worst, to give up. So, Gurukula Vasa Lakshanam implies all these: readiness, adequate punya, to not only be able to go and commit oneself, but also to find a guru who can teach. I was discussing with another Swami, the wonderful place that Puja Swamiji has built in Anekatti, and whether we should work towards building something like that, so that people can be given an option to get into a long-term study, full-time, dedicated study. It looks like a lot of work. It requires a lot of resource. It requires tremendous amount of commitment. And this Swami said something very interesting to me. He said, it is because Puja Swamiji was able to do that for us, we had an opportunity to study. Should we also not ourselves, having studied, provide the same thing for other people? But that also doesn't happen. Just like said, if the student has to have all this preparation and the punya and everything else to be able to study, somebody who wants to set it up for this also requires a lot of punya. It's not easy. Time has to be on your side, resources have to be available. Just one second. But what he said was very valid. We do the next best we can. Gurukula Vasa Lakshanam. Anyadva
Anyadva
Brahma Prapyartham Charanti.
Brahmaprapyatham charanti.
Another way of interpreting this brahmacharyam is anyadva, other, or alternately, Brahma Prapyartham Charanti, one who conducts life with the clear intention, objective of Brahma Prapyartham. gaining that Brahma Jnanam. So here is a little extra that Acharya is giving us. If you cannot be an Antevasi means a Gurukulavasi, for whatever reason, you can still say, I dedicate my entire life to Brahma Prapyatham, Brahma Jnana Prapyatham. That padam, that end, padam can also mean a word, but here padam, that padam, tat te tubhyam,
Tathe tubhyam.
rewrite it, read it slightly, tat padam,
Tat padam.
te tubhyam,
Te tubhyam.
Tubhyam
yat jnatumicchasi,
Yajñātumicchasi.
sangrahena sankshepatah,
Sangrahena
Sangrahena Sankshepadah
I'll tell you, Bravimi,
Bravim.
I will tell you that padam, that end, that word, that to you, te, tubhyam, to you, what word? Yat padam jnatumicchasi, that which you want to know, the end that you want to know, the answer that you want to know. Yesterday I pointed out that I found it intriguing that Nachiketa should use Madhyama Purusha for the Guru. But the Guru using Madhyama Purusha for Nachiketa is valid. A, Nachiketa is a young boy, and B is a Shishya. But therefore he says, Yat Jnatum Ichchasi. Madhyama Purusha, Ekavachanam. I will tell you, Sangrahena. In brief, Sankshepataha. In his typical style, Acharya sometimes gives the word meaning. And like I said, sometimes I find the meaning he gives is more complicated than the original word itself. But here, Sangrahena means Sankshepataha. And what is that? Omityetat.
Omityetat
Tat etat padam
Tat
Tat
Etat
yetat
Padam
padam.
yad bhubutsitam tvaya, yad bhubutsvitam tvaya,
Yat bhubhutsitam.
Tvaya
tat etat omiti.
Yat Etat Om Iti
Yadetat omithi.
Nice to read together. Tadeta dadomiti.
Yadetat
Yadetat
Om
omithi.
Iti
Om Shabda Vachyam.
Om
Om
Shabda
Shabda
Vachyam.
Vacham
Om Shabda Pratikancha.
Om Shabda
Om Shabda
Pratikam.
Pratikancha
He said, Om Ityetat. Om is the word. Om is the padam. Om is the end. That which you want to know. That padam, etat padam, that which you wanted to know. Yad bhubhutsitam. Bhubhutsitam comes from the buddha dhatu, to know. Yad bhubhutsitam, that which you wanted to know. Tvaya bhubhutsitam. Tat etat om iti. This om can be seen as Om Shabda Vachyam or Om Shabda Pratikancha. You can look at the Om Shabda both as something to analyze and understand, derive the origin of that word, or as simply a sound symbol. A pratika is a sound symbol. A pratima is a visual symbol. representing something. Om is a sound symbol, a pratika, representing Sarvam, representing Brahman, representing Atma. So it says can be seen either as something to meditate upon or as something to understand, as the means for understanding the truth that you're seeking. That Om can be seen either way. So it is a pratika. There are many such pratikas in our text. You will find what are often called bija mantras. Reem, Shreem, Heem. All these you will find in many mantras you will see, you will hear this. By themselves, they're nothing. They're only a sound, but they represent something. All of them called pratika. We will talk a little bit more about this in further classes. Where the pratima is an image, a visual symbol. This business of a word representing something either as a sound, even if it's a pratima, I need a word. Shaligrama is an object. But I still need a word called Shaligrama to represent something. And Om is a pratika. And we will analyze a little bit tomorrow in the next class, or the next, whenever we do the next class, on the nature of this pratika. How it can be used both for getting ready, preparation, upasana, or for analysis and understanding. How we should see this word Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasnamada Purnameva Vashishyate.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.